Neil MacDonald. Simon McLean.
Nice to meet you, Simon.
You too. You too. Thanks for coming over
No problem.
on a sunny Friday afternoon here to Pollock.
Mm-hmm.
Neil, where to start? I'm tempted to start at the end because you are coming towards the end of your internship with Ringwood. But I don't want to give away the start too soon. The end too soon. One thing is that one of our interns, I just found out an hour ago, has just landed a job with HarperCollins.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a conveyor belt now. And on one hand, it's frustrating, but on the other hand, it's why we do it.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
And it shows that there's a pathway there for people coming into Ringwood and learning their trade, if you like. Mm-hmm. Tell us a bit about how you came about to how did you come across Ringwood? How did that happen?
So I guess about a year ago, I just finished my degree and I was just kind of working away, and I decided I needed something else. And I wanted, I thought, well, I've always wanted to get into editing.
You finished your degree in?
And it was English journalism and creative writing at the University of Strathclyde.
Okay.
So I finished my degree and I was taking a year out just to sort of build my CV, to work on my opportunities and just sort of expand my skills. And it was at that point.
Make some money.
And also make some money, yes. Yeah. That was that was a significant motivator there.
Okay.
So I thought, well, I've always wanted to actually progress my skills as an editor. So what I'll do is I'll look for publishing opportunities, and I looked for places local in Glasgow, and I managed to find Ringwood. So it was, I was honestly surprised to hear back. I thought, well, they're not going to want somebody that's maybe not done as much, but I was happily taken in. I sat my interview, and I was already working on a proofreading about the next week or so.
Right. So you're thrown in at the deep end, right?
Pretty much, but I'd said I was more than willing just to dive right in and get started.
Let's rewind a wee bit then, because you went to uni to study journalism and creative writing. Mm-hmm. What about school? Have you always had an inkling that you wanted to write? Are you a reader?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I've always been a reader and a writer. I've got a memory of when I was in primary school. There was a sort of local writing competition, and I brought it up to the teacher, much to the chagrin of everybody else.
Yes.
As we were all four, so she thought, "Oh, that's a great idea. All of you go away and write." So
did you get bullied from then on?
Oh, I mean, not more so than usual being the reader, but no. So I've always been certainly passionate to pursue writing as.
Tell us about those early books then. I'm always fascinated by the books that shape us, if you like, Mine is Tom Sawyer, really. I think that's the first time I remember engaging fully with a book. I'd be about 10, 11, 12, something like that. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. I think for me, when I was a kid, I mean, I've always been big into genre literature, so it was a lot of fantasy when I was growing up. So a bit of Tolkien. And I remember, I think I'd read mostly kids' books up until a point my sister told me, you're going to have to start reading adult stuff. It was then I went off the deep end and started reading Stephen King.
You went right to the other end of the spectrum.
So I went from kids' books to, I think I started reading It. And that was an experience. It's certainly something to go from, sort of smaller books with a much more restrictive vocabulary to, an intergalactic cloud.
What age is your sister?
My sister is 2 years older.
Right. Terrible
so
sisters, big sisters, and big brothers. Yeah.
They're terrible.
So that triggered the love of reading then. Obviously it's there. Is your family readers?
To a degree. My mum loves crime fiction.
Right.
She's always been particularly fascinated, actually, with the fairly local scene of crime fiction. And my dad's definitely been more who I would say I take after in terms of my reading sense. So he's read a lot of genre fiction.
So they're both readers. It's kind of hereditary, isn't it?
Absolutely.
About that, I mean, your environment. It kind of. I remember my mum. She was a terribly fast reader. Mm-hmm. She would read a page in about 30 seconds.
Oh wow!
And she had all the Wilbur Smith. Mm-hmm. It became a topic in the household, the plots of the Courtneys and all that with Wilbur Smith. So I think it's triggered. That love of reading is triggered with the environment that you're brought up in as well.
Absolutely, yeah. If you're given ample time and means to...
Hopefully our schools are doing that just now. Because I actually posted it on one of our social medias today about the gift of reading, how it can change lives.
Yeah, I saw that. It was fantastic.
Yeah. So you go to university. Where are you from?
So I'm initially from Bathgate, which is just a wee town between on the railway between Glasgow and Edinburgh, slightly closer towards Edinburgh there. And I just kind of gravitated towards Glasgow since that's primarily where I'd went to university.
So it could have been Edinburgh or Glasgow?
Yeah, it could have been, except I'd been accepted by Strathclyde on an unconditional, and that sort of resolved it for me there, yeah.
And did you move through here?
Yes, I did my degree mostly just from home since I wasn't in class as much, and then I moved about last year, just because I was thinking, well, no, I'll be looking to carve a career for myself. So being
and looking for a job in the city and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So you're a Glasgow boy now?
I'm a Glasgow boy now, yeah.
West End boy.
A West End boy, indeed.
We'll not mention his Partick.
Oh, God.
That's where I was brought up. So.
Oh, God's country.
So, and then you're looking for something last year. You've done your degree. Are you going to go back?
Yes, so I'll be going back for a master's in creative writing. So I'll be trying to kind of hone that arsenal of skills that I've developed at Ringwood even further, just in terms of editing, and also kind of see the other side, how authors can come to understand the publishing industry as well. Okay, are
you a writer?
I would say so, yes.
Okay.
It's definitely a major
I've not noticed anything from Neil MacDonald in the newsletter so far.
Oh, not quite yet, that's true.
What about a short story competition? You know you can put in five entries.
As well.
It's £2 a time, so if you can come up with a tenner.
5, yeah, exactly. 10 for 5 different stories as well.
Are you working on it?
I'll think of something.
I'll think of something.
Think of something.
Do you know how it gets started?
Started as a writer?
How to start a short story?
I mean,
start any story.
Words on paper.
Yeah.
It's always just, there was a fantastic...
The thinking time
That's killer. Yes. That's killer. There was a brilliant article I read when I was studying creative writing. It was talking about the terrible first draft and how crucial that is. And it's so important to just put words onto the paper, regardless of what they are.
Totally.
They can be as terrible, as vernacular as you want. Just as long as words are there, you've made that important first step.
Do you know who taught me that?
Who taught you that?
Sandy Jimison.
Oh.
Gaffer. Because I wrote a couple of chapters of my book, The 10%, for him at his behest, sent them to him, and he said, great, do some more. So I did some more, because all you really want at that stage is some affirmation that what you're doing is not a complete waste of time. But you don't need that, Neil, because you've studied now for 4 years. 4 years at Strathclyde?
Yep, 4 years.
So you know what writing's about. You've got an inkling about it, enough to be self-critical of it. And realise that it needs somebody else to finish it off, usually.
Absolutely.
Don't you think?
Precisely. It's so difficult to step outside yourself and look at your own work when I think writing is an innately intimate art. You put so much of yourself in there that it can be difficult to distance yourself and look at what you've written, that having another person take a look at it can be absolutely crucial for just honing the book even further, and that's exactly where publishing.
You now know that after your last year with Ringwood about proofreading and editing, that we'll come on to in a wee minute. And I was listening to somebody on telly the other night who was talking about exactly the same thing, but not books. One of our greatest ever musicians, Paul McCartney. And he was talking about the days of the early Beatles when him and Lennon just wrote continuously, but it's because there was two of them. To bounce off each other and affirm that what you're doing's got value. That you play a chord and you go, oh, that's nice, that's good. Why don't we try this? And that, two of you. But the problem with an author and a writer is that he's generally locked in the room all by himself with the computer. It used to be a typewriter with a computer. So let's look at the internship, because I've got some news for you. I just learned today from Mr. Jimison, who started you in your internship. He would have interviewed you a year ago.
Indeed, yeah.
He would have given you the ground rules of the internship, and he's supervised you throughout that internship.
Absolutely.
And everything that you've done during there, he's been monitoring and advising. Well, he told me today that your internship has been a resounding success.
Oh, that's very touching to
So
hear.
Ringwood are happy, And bearing in what Amanda said about one of our interns has just gone to
HarperCollins as well,
yeah. So what I want to do here is pick your brains for new interns that are coming on board or thinking about coming on board, thinking of applying, or for interns anywhere, or people who want to get a job in publishing industry. What have you brought to this internship that would prompt Sandy to say it's been a huge success?
I think, crucially, I would say my defining characteristic as an intern has been the willingness to learn.
Right.
Because there are going to be many tasks you will be assigned that might be confusing or difficult at first. And what is most crucial is you give it your best effort.
Mhm.
And then when you get that dreaded email back that says, all right, that's good, but here's how you can make it better.
Yeah.
You sit down, you digest all of it, and then you go away and you do work. And you take that process where you've produced something that's maybe not exactly what's been looking for, and then you refine it and you make it better. So the willingness to learn, I would say, is one of the most important aspects.
Give us an example of that.
A perfect example of that would be the first time I had to do a press release for those tyrannising landlords. I had
which is a book released by
Sean Damer. It's absolutely fantastic. It's a really groundbreaking book and very unique.
And did you work with Sean in the editing process?
Did indeed. So I inherited after the previous chief editor, after most of the editorial work had been done. I did assist as, I was an assistant editor as well, so I wrote sort of the, going through the chapters and analysing what could be improved. So I worked on that, and then afterwards I was put in charge of the next step, so the advanced information and then the press release, which were sort of important for building awareness and generating buzz around the book. These are the documents that will be sent out first and foremost to potentially interested parties. So they've got to be good.
Yes.
And the first press release I sent to Sandy was I wasn't quite sure what I was doing. Instead of maybe asking more, what I'd done was...
But you did it.
I did it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't great initially.
Okay.
And Sandy came back to me and said, it's pretty terrible. So what you're going to need to do is, here's a list of everything you can work on. Here's some examples.
Right.
Go away. And I think what's crucial as well, and what I actually incredibly admire about Sandy, is he didn't lambaste me. He didn't admonish me. What he said was, don't get depressed about it. Don't get upset. Just go back and work.
Yes.
And just get your head down and do it. So he understands that, there can be a process involved. So I went away, came back in about 2 hours. I'd finished it much better. And Sandy said as well, that's an impressive kind of turnaround on the work there.
Yeah.
So I would say it's absolutely crucial to be willing to learn and to accept that maybe sometimes you'll submit work that won't be perfect, but it's part of a process.
So there's so much in there, Neil, just in that one wee story, isn't there? That you get handed something you've never done before. There should be no expectation that you know how to do it, but you do it. And that's the first thing, is you just put words on the paper.
Precisely.
And the length of it, you've taken a stab at, and the format of it, and the start, the middle, the end. You've taken a stab at it and had the guts to press the button and send it. Because that's the hard bit, isn't it? For any writer that writes anything at all, sharing it is the big, big step.
Exactly, yeah.
So you did that with Sandy, and it's great what you've said, because the ethos, I don't know if you're aware of this, but Ringwood has 2 objectives. I've just become the managing director, as you know. So this is very fresh in my head. I wanted to know exactly what Ringwood are all about. And the 2 things that are all that matter are that we produce, I was going to say Scottish-based, that's not right, but with a Scottish theme, hopefully, or a Scottish writer, maybe a first-time author. That would be nice, because we like to give people an in. And it's got to be a work that we perceive, like you did with Tyrannical Landlords, that it's maybe not, can't all be groundbreaking, but it's of a quality and standard that deserves to be told out there. And the big publishers might ignore it completely. And the second part of that is that we give young people like yourself an opportunity to bridge that gap between studying and getting a job in publishing. And we do that very successfully. And those are the 2. So when we lose somebody to HarperCollins, we kind of go, oh no, oh yes.
Yes, it's a very mixed feeling.
Yeah, because it's great. That's why we're here.
Precisely.
For people to move on. The problem was we've now got to replace them.
Yeah.
Or nothing happens. But that conveyor belt is very rewarding as well. So there was something I was going to say about that, and now I've forgotten entirely what I was talking about, Neil. That willingness to put it on paper and send it and get the feedback. And hopefully that's what we all do that are involved in that process. And it's also a learning process for the interns, that criticism very seldom bears any fruit. All you get is a resistance to criticism and defence to criticism. That's not why we exist. It's to help people get better.
Precisely, yeah.
Yeah. And you did that, obviously. So when I said to Sandy about your internship, I said to him, can you tell me the one thing? You said it was a willingness to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And he said attitude. And that's all you need in life, really.
Yeah, a positive
if you've got a good attitude, a positive attitude to learn, if you bring the right attitude to the table, you've got a chance of succeeding.
Absolutely.
See, if you bring the wrong attitude, you've got no chance.
Oh, you're crippling yourself from the start. Attitude is absolutely the motivation.
Okay, so take us back to the start of this. Now, we now know it's a successful internship, so that takes the heat off. Take us back to the start then, when you started off. What was the first tasks that you got?
So the very first task that I'd been assigned was a proofread of Mark Gallagher's Saved by the Fire.
Right,
and
which is doing very well now, isn't it?
Yeah.
I
thought, so I've actually been working with Mark and part of the marketing for that book. And we're always kind of in touch with different things.
When books go well, everybody wants to be involved.
Exactly. But we've been, we often have kind of different discussions about where to sell the book and then kind of different things we can do. We had a blog post up recently as well about Mark's time at Fantasticon too, and that sounded amazing. But I think that was a great novel to start on because I think it was really encapsulated the quality that Ringwood was looking for.
Yeah.
Because it's a superb novel. And it immediately sort of informed me, this is the calibre of writing
set the bar.
Yeah. Precisely. It said it perfectly. And then even still, we still have a proofread.
Yes.
But that's just because regardless...
So what stage was it at when you got involved?
So this would have been, I think, just the last proofread.
Okay.
Just before it went on to publishing.
Right. So the end of the process?
Yeah, right at the tail end, just the last kind of proofread.
Tell us that process for anyone that's watching that's not sure of the process, because I said to Sandy a couple of weeks ago, because I'm trying to learn from him, and it's a steep curve, but there are so many moving parts.
Yeah.
That's what I said to him about our industry and about bringing a book to the table. Because when I got the 10%, when Sandy told me the 10% was going to be published, I thought that was it. I thought a few weeks later it would appear on a shelf somewhere and I would sell it to my pals and that would be the end of it. Oh man, if only I'd known. Because that's really just the start of a long process.
Absolutely.
And the submissions can be a long process. Have you been involved in every stage of that process now?
I would say disparate books.
Okay.
So different books, I would say I've had one complete experience across different books. But I think that has been more beneficial than if I just worked on one book because I get far more variety and I would say I get a wider spread to learn from. So
that's the idea. And when I spoke about this job that I'm now doing, I was curious about that, and the whole ethos is to give you an intern a whole rounded experience of the whole process. Obviously, some people say, "Oh, I'm really interested." In fact, everybody wants to be an editor.
Everybody wants to be an editor.
But as you've heard me say before, without being involved in the sales and marketing side, the promotion side, the proofreadings, the submission side. Once you've got an understanding of the whole process, it helps. If you're going to specialise, you don't get surgeons who started off as surgeons.
Precisely.
You don't even get detectives who started off as detectives. Everybody starts off as a doctor or as a police officer on the beat. And once you've got a grounding of the basics, then you can start to specialise. And I think the publishing industry is exactly the same. Exactly
the same, yep. If you want to get to the dessert of editing, you've got to eat your proverbial marketing greens first. And they're good for you as well.
I like it.
Learning, I mean, much like vegetables.
You carry an author. You keep the analogy going.
I mean, initially you might turn your nose up or you might find them disgusting, but they're good for you. They're full of vitamins that will help you improve and grow, much like learning marketing.
Which is
thank you.
I think there's an article in there for the news.
I could think about that. Yep.
I bet you've got it right.
Oh, it's churning along in there. That's a good idea.
See if you don't hurry up. I'll be doing it.
Oh no! The proverbial.
My original analogy idea about the vegetables and the meat.
It's definitely important to learn all aspects to get, I guess, that I'm going to continue the analogy, the balanced diet of learning, because
we should write this down.
It's all going away here. Don't worry, I'll be popping off after this and getting started. It's absolutely crucial just to develop all of your skills, because to get to that next stage when you are fully devoted to editing, you can't do that in a tunnel. You can't tunnel vision the one job. You've got to understand that there are all of those working parts.
Yes.
So the book will begin with the stage 1 submission. And I think there's a slight stage before that, 0.5, which is just somebody has a look and says,
that's just the submissions team themselves that do that.
Precisely.
And all they're doing is making sure it fits Ringwood's criteria at any particular time.
Yeah.
So it goes through that.
It goes there, and then there's a stage 1, somebody looks over it again and just kind of...
Well, I think they put that out to 5 interns for stage 1 to get initial feedback.
And then there'll be that.
How much of it do you read? How much of a submission do you read to give it a stage 1?
So about 50 to 100 pages, I would say, because I think that's a fair length to assess how good a stage 1 is.
Right. Because we're not making a decision about publishing here. We're just seeing if it goes through this sieve. If it's
we're
well
making a decision about making a decision.
If the topic is on song, if the person can write.
Precisely, yeah. You're just looking for a sort of established competence there, at least. And again, it's not even, assuming it gets by that stage, it might still not get by stage 2. You're making a decision that you will make a decision.
Okay.
So there's a filtration process there. And then you get to stage 2, which that would be full read of the novel, and you write a report, usually about 3 to 4 pages, that just goes over specifically the quality of the book.
Are you given headings for that?
Yep. So you're given headings and a lovely document that tells you everything that you're going to be writing about. Right at the top is at the bottom line, yes or no.
Right at the top, that's the first thing.
Right at the top, first thing. So they know immediately what's going to be going on.
And then you justify it.
Precisely. Yeah. So you put it and it'll be like, just...
Have you ever been...
No.
No?
Oh, no, I couldn't do that. I am far too fervent about the books that we read. I get quite heated about them, so it's always yes, no, and then an explanation about them.
And you're always one way or the other on board with your decision.
Absolutely. It's very decisive, and I think one of the things that I learned from Regilla when we started was...
That's her submissions head. And my deputy.
Exactly.
Assistant. I don't know what she is.
And she's absolutely brilliant. Yeah, indeed. Because one of the first things she told me was, if it's going to take a huge overhaul, it's a no.
Okay.
Because at that point, it can be situational, but I think if you are pushing for a yes, if you find yourself having to say, this is a yes, if this, and this,
then it's a no.
Unfortunately, it's probably going to be a no, because what we're looking for is a manuscript that is not halfway through the process, but towards the end of its eventual stage.
Tidied up.
It needs tidied up. So what you'll do is you'll go through, do the report, just go through the headings there. I believe it's quality, individuality, and uniqueness. Then you'll look at kind of the degree of editing needed. So how much proofreading work will be needed to be done.
So when you're reading it, you're not proofreading it at all? You're not changing anything?
Not changing anything.
Recommending any changes or spelling or grammar or anything?
I think what I always do is I have a notes page right to the side where, as I'm reading it, every time I have a wee thought about it, I write it down. So it'll be anything from, this is a repeated issue I see in terms of the grammar structure, or even just, that line's a bit weak, or that line's really great, love that line. Because what I'll do is I'll then use those in the report, kind of like writing an essay. You take the quotes and you use that as evidence. So I'll use those then to say, the book, has a superb writing voice. Here's a brilliant line that I loved, great turn of phrase, but there's an issue with X character, and then I'll use quotes to explain what the issue might be. Okay.
So there's 5 of you doing that?
I think it will vary. It's about 3 to 5 usually.
Yeah. And those reports go in. How long do you get to read it in? About a month? Yeah,
it's about a month. I've had some that were kind of, I think the shortest I had was 2 weeks. I think it was pretty immediate that it needed to be done. But that wasn't a problem. And the longest I've had is a month. So somewhere between.
Okay.
I would say an average is at 3, but you're looking at 3 to 4 weeks.
And I don't know if you're aware, you probably will be, that submissions is backed up just now.
Yes.
They're really working hard to try and get through it. There's lots went out the other day, stage 1s and stage 2s.
Oh, absolutely.
In that process, which is why we're recruiting interns again next week. And it's a constant process. But that's the kick on from lockdown as well,
Yes.
when everybody wrote a book.
Everyone wrote a book.
Yeah, included.
So,
Yeah, and they're all coming out of the woodwork now.
yep.
It must be very frustrating for authors, but there's a couple of wee things in there too that authors should be aware of. Is that process can take 3 or 4 months.
It can take a while, yes.
Because after stage 2, we'll come on to in a wee minute when it goes to the board for further discussion and reading. But that process can be a frustrating time for an author. And what I've been saying to them lately is don't send it to one publisher. Don't send it to Ringwood and sit back and wait for 6 months. And then do it again and sit back and wait for 6 months. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. You've got to send it out to multiple places. It's also very important to assess publishers before you send it and think, is this a publisher that will publish my book?
Yes.
Does this align with their ethos?
Yeah. Especially if you're sending out one at a time.
Yeah,
And the other part of that, the flip side of that, is that we waste a lot of time at Ringwood
yes.
on books that are already being published elsewhere because the author never came back and told us that it had been accepted elsewhere. So it's going through that process that you're reading it and putting reports in and all. And eventually 4 months later we get back to the author and say, I've got good news for you.
Yeah. Thankfully, we don't as much see the other end of that, because if I think I saw something like that on a report I'd done, I'd think, oh God, all that time.
The good thing about intern time is it's never wasted.
Do you know, actually, that's true. I mean, it's writing a report, it's still honing those skills as well. It's practice. So it is fundamentally, as long as you're doing something, then it's good for you.
When you started off your internship, then the discussion would be around how many hours a week you would devote to Ringwood. What did you discuss that with Sandy? I know it's not a formal thing, it's not contract or anything.
Yeah, I think it was somewhere between 8 to 16, possibly, just over the week.
Okay.
Because I was a graduate, so I didn't have studies. I did still have a full-time job as well. So there was a kind of, that was a very loose agreement in terms of we expect a level of work of those hours. Yeah. And it kind of varies week to week.
I think as a guidance, 8 hours is the kind of minimum, you know.
Absolutely.
If someone can give 8 hours, that's fine. That's great. There are a few issues in there that life gets in the way.
Precisely.
And the good thing about being old guys like me and Sandy and whatnot is we know that.
Yeah.
We know that life gets in the way.
You have the benefit of a life experience.
And what it really needs is to lift the phone or send a wee message and say, I'm going to be out of it for the next week or so. And somebody can pick up on that.
Yeah.
And it keeps all the wheels moving.
Precisely, yeah. It's just, and if there ever is something sort of as well where you are about to be busy, it's important to just communicate, look.
Or go on holiday, or a family member takes not well, or whatever it might be. And that's, everything's manageable. Yeah. If we know.
Exactly.
As long as we know about it. So, stage 2, you've done your report about the book, and what happens then to the book itself? Say it's favourable. Do you get feedback on that? About the other 5 reports or 3 reports that have gone in?
So we won't necessarily hear about that, but when eventually I hear about this book being published, then I will know from, I can ascertain that, okay, it's definitely passed.
So have you done favourable reports, stage 2 reports about books that never got published?
Yes.
What happened to them?
I'm not quite sure. I think it's at that point it goes to submissions and then they would...
No, it's past submissions now.
Past
stage
submissions.
2. It's gone back to submissions and then it becomes an editorial meeting. It becomes a board decision as to whether it's going to get past them. And I think there's about 5 people on the board that read it and have a meeting about it. I've not done that yet.
I've got that to look forward to. I think the only sort of feedback we get would be if we see it being published.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we wouldn't
hear what happens to the ones that fall by the wayside. Yeah. There could be loads of reasons for that as well.
Exactly. I mean, it could
duplication. You know, there's lots of genres that we get stacks of submissions for.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And Ringwood being Ringwood are trying to pluck out. You said, what are the 3 words in the report that you said?
Quality, individuality and uniqueness. And we're looking for that from the myriad of manuscripts that we get in. Yeah.
And they're the kind of guiding lights. So you can see why they can't all go through them.
Absolutely.
And we can't publish, like HarperCollins, we can't publish 200 books a year, you know. It's all time. It's all time and it's very time consuming. So stage 2, the book gets through. What was the first one that this happened to you, where you gave a favourable stage to it and then found out that it was going to go to publication?
That would be 1st of May.
All
So,
right.
I've
Which
done
is just about to come out.
Which, yep. So we're in the pipeline for that. I believe that's set for a 1st of November launch.
So there's a nice idea, a nice grasp of the timescale involved.
Yep.
You've been here nearly a year.
Mm-hmm.
When did you join?
So I joined, I think it was about September last year, just at the tail end of
So you're
September.
about 11 months into that,
Mhm.
and this is the first book that you've seen from inception to completion.
Exactly. And I wrote the report for that. Let me see. I think actually that was early this year, if not late last year.
Okay.
So it can take a while to get, even if it's a positive result, for it to be fully processed to the point where...
And was that a positive report you wrote?
It was indeed, yes. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a superb memoir.
And are you still involved with it?
I am indeed. We've had a bit of a... We've had a change to the usual formula in that we're going to be a bit more involved with the book itself. That's due to the unfortunate passing of the author.
Yes.
A couple of weeks ago because of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. So I'd met Brendan once before, and honestly, it's heart-wrenching that we weren't going to get to develop that sort of author-editor experience. He was a fascinating man, and I would have loved to have heard more from him, and also just talk about parts of the book, because he was a fascinating man. He was actually quite involved with Ringwood as well.
Yes.
He was a sort of regular to events. So
of course. Really, he came to all the launches and things.
Absolutely. So it's an absence that will be felt. And because of that, I think the least we can do is see through the book and ensure that it is...
Well, I know that you've volunteered. You were due to finish your internship next month, but you volunteered to stay on and see this project through.
Absolutely.
In respect to Brendan and his family. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know that we'll make a really good job of it when the time comes, because I think it's later in the year it's going to go out this year.
Yeah, 1st of November there.
So what we're aiming towards?
That's what we're aiming towards.
Okay. That'll be an emotional launch as well, because a lot of his friends, so many friends and families,
absolutely,
west of Scotland and beyond.
Mm-hmm. And what we can provide for them is a novel from Brendan, and it's close to his words.
Yeah. Tell us a wee bit about the novel then. I wouldn't normally do this. It's your interview, Neil, but the 1st of May is... I think we're duty bound to have a wee chat about it.
Yeah, of course.
And you obviously loved it.
Mm-hmm. I thought it was superb. It was... I had a very interesting experience when I wrote the report, because I was reading it for about the first... This is terrible, but about the first 100 pages, and I thought, this is mental. Uh-huh. What's going on? This is very reminiscent. This is very reflective. Very, very interesting character, this Brendan. And I think because I'm from a younger generation, I didn't know much about him. So I gave him a Google and I went, oh, he's a real person. Is this? Yeah. Oh, this is his memoir. Oh my! And it was at that point, this is a memoir. This isn't a piece of fiction. And from that point onward, it was a complete paradigm shift on how it seems. I had to go back and revise my notes previously. Okay. So I had to read it again. I was like, oh, I've completely misunderstood that. But I'm still managed to get it done, just go through it, and just completely reconsider it. It was at that point I realised, well, it is a superb memoir.
Yeah. What makes a good memoir then?
Oh.
Given that I've written one.
I think it's...
Well, what a lot of people have said to me about my book, The 10%, is that they like the honesty of it.
The honesty, yeah. Honesty.
It was obvious that I was just speaking truthfully. I wasn't embellishing anything.
And I think that's because when it comes to editing a memoir, it's very difficult because you have to preserve this balance between voice and then sort of trimming redundancies or looking at better phrasing, for example, because you want to conserve the author's voice as much as possible. Yeah. However, there is still an editing process.
Of course. Yeah.
So it can be very difficult to decide, because it's much easier for fiction where you've got a line that just doesn't sound great. It's a bit clunky, it's overbearing, so you go, right, change this, split that, do this, X, Y, Z. You give a bunch of suggestions. It's different for a memoir, because part of it, for example, like run-on sentences are very characteristic of a stream of conscience narrative.
Yes.
So you're wanting to preserve things like that, but also to help the book be better. So
Yeah.
it's surgical almost.
Yeah. Interesting, though. And
Very
engaging.
interesting. Mm-hmm.
So we go from the board saying, yeah, we're going to publish this.
Mhm.
Then the work starts.
Yeah.
Is that when the editorial team get involved?
That's when the
somebody's
editorial team
appointed head editor?
Yes.
And there's an assistant editor as well.
Yes.
So tell me what the chief editor, were you the chief editor on the 1st of May?
I was indeed, yes.
Okay, so tell me his or her job. We've never had a first editor.
Oh,
This is-
exciting. So the first thing is go, oh my God, I'm head editor.
Yep.
What do I do?
Have you already read the book
I had already read it.
from start to finish?
From start to finish for my report.
For your second, your stage 2 report?
Yeah, so I was already familiar with it.
Okay.
So I had the benefit of knowing the book already. So the first thing was to get in touch with the assistant editors and start the process.
Editors? How many of you?
So there's 3 of us. So there's me, Olivia, and Rachel as well.
Okay, some team.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
So we had we split the workload because there was sort of 2 major points that we wanted to work on with 1st of May. So I was looking at one, and they were looking at the other.
Can you tell me what they were?
So for me, I was looking at the structure because part of a memoir, obviously it's important to regard the past, but there was a lot of sort of long stretches of reverie, and there's a lot that kind of can mire the reader in the past.
Okay.
So I was looking at the different ways that we can bring the reader back to the present,
Yeah.
sort of maintain that healthy relationship between what's going on in the sort of overarching narrative and then what's happening in the past and how they
And was Brendan engaged with that in that process with you at that point?
At that point, I think I'd met him briefly. We'd sort of discussed. I showed up at the Clutha, gave a very terrible impromptu speech about, yeah, we're going to be publishing the book. It'll be great. Was
Right.
not expecting that, but it was nice to see how excited he was as well. So at that point, we'd gotten our work done there, and we wrote a sort of general report at first.
Okay.
So you start with the general report, we'd send that along to Brendan. However, this was during the process of
I'm taking unwell.
him taking on well. So he'd managed to see it, and he did agree to the changes. That was
Right.
the crucial part, is that we'd gotten his consent.
So you had the ethos of the thing.
Precisely.
Are you happy that the finished product is how Brendan would have wanted it to be, as best as you can gauge?
I think we're still in the process of editing itself, so we've still got a bit to go there. So we're still stuck there, just due to how sort of unprecedented the situation is.
Yes.
We're kind of taking a bit longer there just to look at the book. I know myself, I'm sort of deliberating over it because what it deserves is the best. It deserves.
Yes. It's almost harder, isn't it? In fact, it definitely is when you can't get the author's stamp on it.
Exactly.
You're
So-
responsible now.
Precisely. So we're at that stage here, and we're sort of conglomerating that with the sort of smaller changes in just the novel itself. But I think they're taking less priority just due to the nature of the situation. So we're working on sort of the bigger things, but trying to strike that balance between how authentic it is to Brendan's memory, but also giving it the quality Ringwood editing experience.
Yeah, which is our main thing. So that editing process can take any length of time. That's very difficult
Yes,
to put
I think
a time space.
if it were more sort of the usual process, it would be you give the author the feedback, specifically big changes first, and then they can enact that without, because there's no point looking at smaller changes when you've still got bigger changes to go.
Yeah, the structural ones.
Precisely, because that can just cataclysmically change the novel, and you're making edits on things that might potentially not exist anymore, that are no longer in the novel. So it's a lot of work to go through for it to possibly not even be relevant. So after that, you go to the smaller changes after bigger changes are done, which is just the moment to moment. So that's when you're looking through each of the chapters, and the difference between those can just depend on the author there, and then depending on how kind of comprehensive your initial feedback is. I mean, you've been an author yourself, so would you say
I am an author.
You are an author.
Don't ever become an ex-author.
That's a good point.
Ever. I wrote a book, it was published, I'm an author. The end.
Good point.
Thank you.
Author, there they are. So you are an author.
Yes. I might not be right.
What Ben says, so you went through sort of the Ringwood experience.
I did.
So how would you say...
To the ringer, I would call it.
the Ringer of Ringwood. So how would you say the editing process was for you then on the other end?
Hey, it's your interview, nobody. The editing process is tiresome as the author, because I've read the book. See, by the time it goes to Ringwood, I've read it a dozen times, every chapter. Yep, some more than that you're not quite happy with. So by the time I send it to Ringwood, I think it's the finished article. You know that, don't you?
Yeah.
When an author sends a book in, they think, that's it, wrap it up, put a cover on it, Bob's your uncle. So then I've read it a dozen times to get it to that stage, and then it comes back. And I realise, wait a minute, I never noticed that. Yeah, maybe they've got a point there. The main point for me was that I'd like to make here is that nobody changed a word.
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody changed one word of what I had written.
Nothing gets changed.
Or took a word out. What they did was recommend.
Precisely.
And the first recommendation was the structure. And maybe some chapters. Sandy phoned me about a chapter and said, I think we should take that out.
Yeah.
And he was absolutely right, because it would have caused more problems than it was worth.
Precisely.
So we took that out. And so he was looking at the overall makeup of the book and how it joined up. And the way I had done it, Neil, was because when I was writing it, I had the problem of joining it up, a memoir.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just one big story. And I didn't want it to be like that because it was split into segments, and I wanted it to finish at a specific point when my daughter died. So I had the end. I had to start when I joined the police, or where I was born, and the kind of background to that.
Yeah.
But what Ringwood did, or what Kevin, the editor, did, was help me structure it into 4 different parts, which had clear stoppage. It gives the reader a break as well.
Precisely, yeah.
If you're reading it and you get to the end of part 1, you can digest that,
Precisely,
think about it, and pick it up the next time ready. It's like starting a new book, isn't it?
Exactly.
Instead of that, continue it. The other thing he did, which I thought was great, it's probably old hat to you, he said to me, Simon, we don't mention the police for the first 12 pages. Because I was talking about where I was born and my granny and Rangers and Celtic and how things were in the 50s, late 50s. And he said, we don't mention the police for 14 pages. And yet it's a memoir about a police officer. So I put a wee 1-pager in at the start, a car chase. Yeah. Right at the start. Which wouldn't have occurred in the book until near the end. It was surveillance unit stuff, chasing a daft car chase. It was quite amusing as well, I thought. But it was only 1 page. So it took the reader to the end of the book and then said, but let's go back to the start.
Exactly. How crucial is that first page as well?
Sets the whole tone.
Precisely. I remember a co-worker once asking me about reading submissions. And like, so how can you tell? And I said, well, actually, the first page is absolutely crucial in informing you the rest of the book. So I took, because I always carry books with me, so I had 3 with me at the time. I brought 3 of them out and I was like, let's look at the first page for each of them. And what we're going to do is say if we want to read more. The first one was like this almost geographical survey of the surroundings of the main location. And it was boring. It was pretty dull. And it was, we've all heard of these sort of Gothic mountains and these thunder-swept moors, and it's not that exciting.
To you.
To me, indeed, but I read it and I thought I wouldn't want to read more because
that's the test.
Yeah, precisely. Then we moved to the next one, was the main character describing himself. It's important for the rest of the book. It was interesting, but it wasn't quite there. Then we get to the last one. It begins right in the action. Right? You're hearing about a funeral that's went horribly wrong. Okay? And that's immediately, you're right there. Yeah. You're engaged because you want to read more.
Yes.
Absolutely. So when you have that first page that entices you further, I think actually Mark Gallagher mentioned this in one of our recent videos on the Ringwood page, was about hitting the ground running.
Yes.
And he's got that chapter which is Hartman hit the ground running. Yeah. Literally.
Crime books do it all the time as well. They start with the murder. They start with the body or the stabbing or shooting or whatever, and then take you back. Take you into the story.
Build up to there. So you get that exciting start, and then you've engaged the reader.
And every film you've ever seen is the same. It starts off to draw you in and ask questions. What you're trying to do really is get the reader or the watcher or the listener to think, is to ask, what's going on here? What's happening? Yeah. Even confusion can do it as well. Very interesting. So, chief editor, What do the other two editors, what's their role then if you're the chief editor?
So they were also looking at the novel just with a different perspective. So while I was looking
So you all
at the
read the whole thing
Yeah.
at that point?
Mhm.
Yep. You don't take the first 100 pages? Or,
Oh no, you've got to, it's more beneficial to look at the full, just the full novel, the full manuscript, but also with different focuses.
okay.
So you have one person, like you're going to look at it for this, I was structure. Then my two assistant editors were looking at specifically for the representation of women in the manuscript. So they had that out
Okay.
there, whereas I was looking at structure. So the other thing as well is, even though you've got this focus, you will just notice other things as well as you're reading that can contribute to that sort of comprehensive document you're going to send back. So it's sort of more beneficial just to take it as a thematic approach than right, you do the 100 pages, list everything that could be an issue with that, 200, because that's
more a proofreading process maybe.
Precisely, yeah.
So you're not proofing it at all when you're editing it?
Not at that stage, no. The proofreading...
You just leave that if you see a mistake, a spelling mistake, you just leave it?
You can make a note of it, but at that point, since the proofreading...
It's not what your focus is on.
Precisely, yeah. It's more beneficial to just focus on just the almost like the texture, the feeling of the book itself, than...
Because I'd say most people that are not involved would think an editor does both those functions at the same time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's not like that.
Well, precisely. I mean, before I joined Ringwood, I'd assumed that was the case as well, but to find out that it's different processes, that was quite interesting. Okay.
And are there editorial meetings going on at that point? How do they see you convey to each other that you're on the same page, if that's not too much of a plan?
It's I use that one all the time before, just to make sure we're on the same page. So what it would be is just, we'd set a deadline for the first sort of overlook there, then send that back to the author once that comes back. And we sort of have meetings, an initial one just to discuss. So you would, I would tell the assistant editors, go read the book, take notes, we'll have a meeting.
Let's get back together.
And then after that point, so what we did is we had our first meeting where we were unanimous on those two issues. And
it's a Zoom meeting?
Yeah, it was a Zoom meeting at the time because one of our interns was in Edinburgh. Okay. So it has... You know, and that's another great thing about Ringwood as well. You know, you can be
all over the place,
and it's very versatile for, you know, so you can work from where you're situated. But
well, Radula, our head of submissions, is just down the road in Delhi.
That's a far drive, that one. But absolutely, yeah, you can. There's a lot of versatility for interns, so you don't necessarily need to be situated in Glasgow, although it helps you keep in touch with the sort of local aspects of the job. So, what we would do is have that first meeting, discuss the book, then we would start the general overview. So sort of just writing a document detailing everything we kind of discussed in that meeting, but from our perspective.
Okay.
So that's a couple of pages just talking, you know, about the general issues. This was good, this plotline needs worked on, this character.
Any friction there with the author?
With the author?
I'm not talking about 1st of May here, but I'm talking in general when you're editing. Because you're recommending changes.
Yeah.
But sometimes the author might see that as interference.
Absolutely. It can be something of a compromise.
Kevin, who edited my book, suggested we take a chapter out, another one. And it was a frivolous chapter, but I found it so funny. And I insisted on it staying in, and it did.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about compromise. I think that's the crucial part of the process, is that there are going to be things that the author sees as absolutely crucial
to the essence of what he's trying to do.
Precisely, that the editor might not necessarily agree with or think that it would improve the book to be removed. And that's where we're talking about, you know, Paul McCartney of the Beatles, there was 2 of them. It's important to have that dialogue rather than, you know, a monologue at each other about what could be improved about the book, to have that process of... I think this can be improved. Well, I like that.
Different perspectives.
Precisely. So having those different perspectives can really help to enhance the book and take it to
the next stage of quality. It helps that creative process, doesn't it? So you've got the book edited, the author's on board, and things are coming together. We've still got things like the cover, the blurb, the marketing, all that stuff. A question that is in my head is, has anyone at Ringwood ever said to you that during that process of selection, think about the commercial side of the book?
So that's one of the last headings in the reader's
Right.
report, marketability.
Right.
So you've got to think, who wants to buy this book?
Mhm.
Because at the end of the day, you can have your masterpiece. You can have, I don't know, your Paradise Lost, your Count of Monte Cristo.
Your 10%.
Your 10%, precisely. And thankfully, people want to buy the 10%. That's why it's
Well, they were
published.
told.
But oh god. So strong arm marketing aside, I think at the end of the day, you have to assess: is it viable for publishing? Will people enjoy it? Will people want to buy it? And that is the crucial part there. And I think when you're accepting the book and you're going through that editorial process,
That's always in the back of your mind.
Exactly.
But it's not the top priority.
At that stage, not quite yet. That becomes,
and it's maybe the board that have more invested in that decision.
I would say the board would have more investment, also more experience generally, given that they'd be the ones to pioneer what books we're publishing.
Because what Ringwood are always looking for is for the book to at least pay its way.
Exactly.
That's really it, because it's not for profit. There's nobody getting a wage. It's to keep the operation going.
Precisely.
Books have to self-finance to a degree at the end of the day by selling enough to cover. Okay, I was just wondering if anybody ever said to you that the commercial aspect was up there. Like it probably is in the big booksellers, in the big companies.
Yeah, I think
Commons is one of the top 5.
Oh, absolutely.
So they're looking at commercial, and if it's a celebrity, then it's almost guaranteed to get published, isn't it? Because it's going to sell.
I think it's definitely something that you, again, like you said, acknowledge in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
But it's kind of, you're more focused at the task at hand at the moment, which is editing, the proofreading, etc.
So you've done proofreading as well?
Yes.
Lots of it?
I've done a fair amount, yeah. I've done a couple.
I've not done that yet. That's the next thing I'm going to try. Because I like to try all these things so
Yeah.
I can say I've done it.
Perfect.
And I envisage doing it with a ruler. Or a rule. Do you know what I mean? On the page, one line at a time.
The way I kind
not reading it, just looking at it.
Yeah, you've got to take, it is strange. And I think Sandy described it as it is grueling work, and you've got to be very pedantic.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, totally.
If you think something's an issue, then you write it. Because what happens with the proofread is you'll get multiple proofreads that will go to a copy editor that will then actually assess whether or not the changes need to be made.
Okay.
So
even the proofreader's not making any changes.
Exactly.
No matter
all
how
they do,
obvious it
they've
is.
got a document up at the side, they've got a table, you put in page, line, what's the error, what's the suggestion, comment only if necessary. Obviously, a misspelled word doesn't need to be commented on, but commas can be controversial at times.
Yeah, or just the grammar, the way a sentence is constructed.
So you can say, this...
Suggest.
This, maybe change that a little bit. You see less of that because that's usually something that's sorted in the editing stage.
Okay.
But it's still possible that something can slip through.
Yeah, well, they do. 10%'s good. 2 or 3 or 4 that slip through. I got them changed for the e-book. But the damage is done then, because that first edition, there's 250 of them going out, and your pals are phoning you up. That's what they focus on. 400 pages, right? 400 pages of hilarious police fun and activities, and they pick up on shoulder instead of soldier.
Yeah.
Something daft like that. But that's what they phone you about, because it's your pal. They're never going to phone up and say, I enjoyed the book, right, man? That's never going to happen on a Monday, Tuesday.
No.
Okay, so we're now on to the proof editing and proofreading and more editing.
Yeah.
And eventually you get a book.
Yes.
The cover comes to life through, in this case, it's Sky that's doing them, and they're fantastic. There's a real ethos there now to the design of the books as well. It's becoming a real brand, which is the whole idea.
Of course, yeah.
And then, I don't know if you've done it before, but the place I met you, I think, for the first time was at the launch of those those landlords, those nasty landlords.
Tyrannising landlords.
That's the word. With Sean. And you were taking the lead on his launch.
Yes.
Tell us how that came about.
So that's part of... So after I'd done with the sort of assistant editorial side, I was then put in charge of the lead up to the launch and then the marketing the book. So coming up with a marketing plan and then getting the book ready. So I worked on...
Did you have any experience in marketing?
At that point, no.
Right. So who's helping you with that? Is that a learning curve?
Pretty much a learning curve. I think at that point, we'd had the market manager at the time I'd asked them for advice, and they were able to tell me some stuff to do, and then eventually actually used the work I'd done as an example in a meeting of how to do a good marketing plan. So that's a huge boost to your confidence. Having your work be used as an example. So what it was a case of getting the marketing plan in place, and then working on kind of, I think we've mentioned before, things like a press release and advanced information sheet, and then coming up with events in the lead up to it. We'd had an event planned, but that one unfortunately was cancelled due to the potentially political nature of the book, which was crazy. So I'd tried to get in touch with the Glasgow Herald about an article about that, but unfortunately no dice. Which was a shame, because that would have made a superb article to accompany the book. But what we'd done is we'd gotten the venue, and Sean had a connection with Oran Moore, so he could get us a location set up there. After that point, it was just about marketing the book, so we had our social media rolling, growing awareness about the book there. And then we've got an interview, we had a review recently done in a historical fiction magazine as well. So that was great. Still plagued by issues of Amazon screwing up the title of the novel, which is ridiculous.
They're great when things go right.
Yeah, but when things go wrong...
Mostly they do, in the honesty.
Generally do, yeah.
But when they mess up, which is bound to happen sometimes, with miscommunication or whatever, they're terrible at fixing
that's awful, yeah. They're adamant that it's ridiculous, because you've got the title of the wrong book and the picture of the book. That has a completely different title, and you're thinking, why has nobody looked at that?
And the number, they can get the number.
They get the ISBN, perfect. So you have the marketing stage there, and that's a bit more, I would describe that as a marketing sprint. You've got a lot going initially.
Short space of time.
Right into the lead up of the launch, because it's that quarter one that's crucial. Q1 is crucial. That is where you're going to get all your sales. First sales quarter of the book. So that's where you do your sprint, make everybody aware of it, get your sales.
The launch night is a launch pad, really, isn't it?
Exactly, So it's the launch pad for blasting the book off.
You've got to maximise it. And that blast of sales is what triggers the next batch. If you can get a good first wave, you maximise the second, because word of mouth and whatnot. And then there's all the awards and things that we're putting together just now that a lot of our books are eligible for.
Precisely.
And doing very well in as well. So once the launch, after the launch night, and you hosted the launch night, how did you put yourself in that role?
I was appointed that role.
Right. So had you done any public speaking before that?
I did address the Haggis in primary school in front of the school once. That's the extent. No, not really.
And the fact that I'm asking you that is a real compliment.
No,
because if you had said yes, I'm talking all these Burns nights and things, I'd have believed you, because you didn't appear as though it was phasing you at all. You were very, very good.
Preparation.
A bunch of strangers. Preparation.
Where improvisational skills are lacking, preparation is crucial.
See, I'm the opposite. I like to.
Really? I think if I'm confident that I can, but I didn't want to leave that to the vicissitudes of my potential confidence on the night. I was like, no, just write it all in advance.
The CPs, you know them?
Preparedness. Practice. Preparedness
and prepared. I say preparation.
Perfect.
It's only the one thing that matters. And it's true if you're prepared for whatever's going to happen, there's not. And you had plenty of experience round about you as well. Caught you if you'd fallen over. But you were really good on the night, and you set the tone perfectly on the night. I thought it was a lovely night for Sean's book.
It was indeed.
And is it doing well still?
Yeah, we're still just kind of working on the marketing plan a bit, just seeing. We might have a bit of a bump recently. I'm thinking there was...
So that was released, 3 months ago now?
Yes, that would have been.
And you're still working with them to market the book?
So that is the point of the marathon. So once the book's launched, the sprint's done, it's the marathon time. So it's at that point where you're just working on little bits here and there, get the reviews, get it, but you're still in for the long haul.
Okay. And there's a whole rabbit hole that I want to go down here with you, but I'm not going to go down this just now. And it's to do with each individual book that we bring out has got a unique market. of its
Absolutely,
own,
yes.
depending on the topics that are covered, the subjects that are covered, the people that are involved. Historical fiction lends itself perfectly to it, as we've seen just now. Alan Nichols' book about the Sheila Garvin murder and things like that stand out as having themes that we can tap into. None more so than Sean's book, The Landlords.
Oh, absolutely.
Because of the Irish, and nobody's written about these things before. That's what's surprising.
Exactly, that's why it's so groundbreaking. So it's really the first of its kind assessing, a first-generation Irish immigrant family coming to Glasgow and getting that sort of out, in a way, there's definitely a relationship between the two of them, but seeing an almost outsider perspective of Glasgow, and then their eventual integration into Glasgow sort of society, and reminding us of an important part of their ancestry.
And I think there are markets here. You and I will have to have a chat later about the markets here out with Scotland.
Yeah, potentially.
With the Irish community all over the world, the expat communities, like Scottish expats all over the world. That there are markets there that people should be aware of the book.
Precisely.
And they're not just now, because we don't have that kind of reach.
Yeah, and that is the unfortunate part as well, is just the lack of reach. And because it's got to be done, but you send those emails to your Waterstones, you send those emails or your phone call, your Glasgow Herald, your newspapers, hello, I'm an intern from Ringwood Publishing. We've got this book. Would you be interested? Here's the information. And
nothing.
Silence.
Yes. Well, it gets worse than that. I'll leave that just now because I'm still in the throes, but I've been into a couple of Waterstones in the last couple of weeks and they've been very interested in doing something. And then silence.
Yeah.
And you email and it's still silence. It's very strange. And they must be getting bombarded. I think that must be the answer to it. So we're going to have to circumvent that.
Yeah, and it's
just set up a stall outside the shop.
Come look at the books Waterstones doesn't want you to buy.
Because the local connection is a no-brainer for me. They want you, they're in Silverburn or East Kilbride or wherever. And we've got an author that lives around the corner and they're not tapping into that for some reason. Yeah,
it's strange because that was the case with trying to get, I think it was Mark Gallagher's Saved by the Fire. I think it was the Ayrshire Waterstones, I believe. And I'd given a call. Oh yeah, just send an email to our manager. Nothing.
Yeah.
And I sent the number. I'm thinking,
frustrating.
You'd rather free sales for you.
No thanks.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't want to do that, and that's fine. You can move on then instead of getting encouraging noises. Anyway. That's our problem. we need an intern to solve that. We're advertising for one now.
Oh, absolutely.
So, the future for you, Neil. You're going to be with us to see through to the launch. Do you know anything about the launch yet? Have you got a date or anything for the 1st of May?
So, just probably 1st of November is the date. So, everything we're doing
working towards.
Yeah.
We've got a venue?
Not yet. However, what I'll do is probably be in touch with either the Scotia or Cliffa.
Yes, because of Brendan's connections there, and music and all the rest of it. Yes. He's a real character knowing about there, a musician. Okay, so it'll be probably in Merchant City around the 1st of November.
Aye, indeed.
Are you going to be fronting that? Do you know yet? Decided yet?
I'm not sure. I'll certainly, this time I'll put myself forward for that just because I think it would be, I've seen this book from inception to development. We're still in the throes of getting that edited, but once it's through that stage, we've kind of, I think because of the circumstance, we're working on part of the next stage, some of the marketing alongside the editing.
Right.
So we've got a bit of an involved process here, just so that we can get to that 1st of November.
And you've got the experience of doing that now as well. You're the very man for the job, as far as I can tell. We started this off by me telling you that Sandy had given you a glowing reference, or will be giving you a glowing reference. He gave a verbal one to me. What would your reference be for Ringwood then, as looking back on your internship, which is not finished yet, but that year that you signed up for, what would your feedback be to Ringwood about that?
It's been absolutely invaluable. I think it's been enlightening, finding out all the different facets of the publishing industry, finding out that, again, you don't just put a book to the publishers and it shows up on the shelves. There's so much more going on. And you'll develop skills not simply just with editing, proofreading. You learn, like we said as well, marketing. You learn just an absolute myriad of skills that are going to be valuable in your arsenal going forward. They're going to help you shine out against other people that don't have that crucial experience.
And maybe the wee icing on the cake for that comes to my mind speaking to you, is that during the course of engaging, because that's what you've done because of your attitude, because of what you wanted from it, you get out what you put into a great degree.
Absolutely, yeah.
And because you've engaged with that, Neil, and done a job as far as that's concerned, the icing on the cake is the people you've met along the way.
Oh, definitely.
The Brendans of the world.
Exactly. The Brendans, the Sandys, the Simons. Precisely. You meet fascinating people.
Sean.
Sean as well,
Yeah. All the other interns.
All the other
who are all coming at it from their own perspective.
Yeah, and it's interesting seeing going from being sort of new to then now being like a senior intern, a veteran,
veteran
of my 1,000-yard stare, exactly, when they ask about proofreading. So you can sort of tell them what I kind of do as well when I meet interns is like, look, you're here, it's a learning experience, just do your best. And if something doesn't, turn out perfect first time, just keep trying. Just have a positive attitude and you'll be able to push on and you will get just absolutely crucial experience from it.
Good. I'm glad you've had a positive. Nobody's going to believe this, of course. I think you've got a script here.
They can't see the gun that's over here, unfortunately.
But that's great. And the future for you, Neil, you got things mapped out for the next couple of years?
For the next year, so I've got my master's. I'll be going back to Strathbridge, my master's in creative writing there, just kind of getting the other side of the publishing process, as well as hoping to just further develop my own writing skills.
Good.
And see where that will take me. I think I will also still be looking at potential positions in publishing.
Yes.
And now that I feel confident because I've got that experience.
You can talk the talk now. Well.
Exactly. I can say readers' reports, proofreads, submissions. All
the jargon.
Exactly.
That's still well, isn't it? Yeah. Well, whatever you do, on behalf of Ringwood, I can do that now.
Thank you.
Wish you all the success. But there's a catch.
Oh.
Because you're now part of the Ringwood family.
Oh, that's me.
And that's a lifetime.
It is indeed.
It's like me being an author. I'll always be an author now. And you always have been a Ringwood intern.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you're not going to lose touch with us. You're still going to engage.
Of course, yeah.
And I think events when you can.
Precisely, and that's an important part because there's so much that I've learned and that Ringwood has anyway done for me that it's only right to return that, not just during the scope of your internship, but beyond as well.
Good.
And you'll get to meet other interns too out with. I mean, it'll be interesting, given a couple months' time when I'm in my master's coming back to launches and meeting like the new interns that might be there or seeing who's still around.
Yeah.
It's interesting, definitely.
And any projects that you're doing as part of your degree or whatever, there's always Ringwood there for you to tap into.
Exactly.
Practice on. Okay. Thanks very much, Neil.
No problem. Thank you, Simon.